I know we've got several on here that are big putting guys. So we have Bruce Redrick here. He's a 30-year member of the PGA. Some real cool things about Bruce is he was the head professional at Latrobe Country Club, which if you don't know, which I don't know how you couldn't in this golf business, but that was the where Deacon Palmer, Arnold Palmer's father, was a golf professional, head professional, and then that's where Arnold grew up in Latrobe, PA. Currently, Bruce is a teacher in Indiana, and he is one of the top instructors listed under the Golf Magazine's Teachers Best in State, as well as being recognized by the Indiana PGA as being the 2022 Teacher of the Year. So I'd like to welcome Bruce to the Mid-Atlantic section. And Bruce, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. This is a lifelong journey for me. Putting has been, because I was lousy as a kid, always looking for the answers. And just to share quick little bit of history, I was part of the original team that brought Putt Lab to the United States from Germany. So that was 2004, 2005. And my job was to go and show golf professionals the technology and what it could do. And the idea was that there was an optimal stroke, that everybody could use the technology then to find their optimal stroke. Well, I go on the road with some doubts, and it played out pretty quickly that I didn't see too many optimal strokes. I saw a lot of different strokes and a lot of different measurements and a lot of different patterns. And one of my first tasks was to go to Hank Haney's ranch in Texas and tell Hank in 2006 that Tiger Woods' stroke wasn't optimal. And I said, I think you guys have got the wrong guy. I'm going to go watch everything that he does, and I'm going to soak it all up, and I'm going to try and figure it out. Well, what that led to was that I kept collecting strokes and kept collecting strokes and kept collecting data. And eventually we found that there were 9 basic strokes that we found were successful. And I'm just going to run through them here real quick just to show you. I'm always available. There'll be a email address and obviously this program. But these are the 9 that we found. And basically what it is, well, that's good. And all of a sudden I can't advance.
Uh-oh.
There it is.
There we go.
All right. So profile 1 is basically just an upright profile. If you have technology, this would be a more vertical stroke plane and tilted a little bit inside down the line. As we go forward, I will explain to you how we found how people do that. Well, why? There we go. I'll just use the screen. Okay, profile 2 then is what the Germans thought was the optimal stroke. This is a 10-degree plane if you use Visio mats or a well pump mat. Number 3, this is, and I'm gonna go back just to give you an idea. That's Arnold Palmer. That's most of the tour guys now because they're building their stroke to try and fit that model. This is Jack Nicklaus. This is Tiger Woods when we first met him. This is profile 4. This is a little bit bigger arc and a little bit inside down the line. Tiger has since moved to a more vertical plane. Profile 5 is the standard putting arc, the wooden putting arc, the old wooden putting arc, or what we started out with. 6 is the what most guys called straight back and straight through, was actually straight back and hold it square, and the putter actually finished left when they could measure it, if that makes sense. So if you look at the back half of that stroke, you see a very small arc relative to the target line and pretty straight. But instead of continuing on that straight path, when we started to measure everybody, the shock was that they finished left. Rory McIlroy, when he first saw his stroke, that's what he saw. And that set off a panic that he's been fighting ever since. Where if you just probably go back to this stroke, you'd probably be fine. It's the one he used as a kid, I say. All right, profile 7. This is Ben Crenshaw. Big inside down the line. This is kind of an old school stroke, but we still see it occasionally. Profile 8 is just the big arc parallel path. Bigger people, people with shorter arms than their height, broader chests, they'll start to see this kind of rotation and this kind of pattern. And then profile 9 is just the same dynamic arc, but sweeping to the left. This is Lauren Roberts in his prime. So I didn't feel like arguing with any of those guys about what their stroke looked like. And so we went off on our own and started to study, well, what causes this? And so the next part of this is basically how I teach. Now, in no way is my goal for you guys, for anyone to see this and go, I'm going to do it like Bruce does. What my goal is to show you that what we found, that's what we feel is important, and can you identify it? And when you do identify it, how would it apply to your method? Because all the methods, anybody that I've ever come across now that has a method in their teaching and putting will fit into this program in some way. I use all 9, they might not use all 9. They might have certain patterns that they like to see. But the things that we're going to go over today all will lend themselves to whatever pattern of stroke you feel is the best. If you think it's profile 2, I can engineer anybody to make a stroke in a profile 2, knowing what I know from what we learned from the other profiles. You play the ball under your left eye, you make a stroke that's parallel shoulders with parallel feet and parallel forearms, and you're going to get a number 2 stroke pattern. The problem is, can you do it without thinking about it? Can you put yourself in that position, or does your body type and your tendencies, does it influence the way you swing the putter? And so you'll find that you'll find a lot of players who will try to be that profile 2. That's the optimal stroke. I'll try and be that profile 2, but to get a 5-footer for par in a tournament that means something, and the tendencies will kick in and they'll miss it. And so when we make players aware of their tendencies, we know that that's going to help them be better. All right, so step number 1, we're going to try and find a balanced posture. This is moved. It used to be number 3 on the hit parade. And since I've had a chance to work with some swing cats, some force plates, it's now become probably the most important thing I can learn about a stroke. And to find a balanced posture and a consistent anchor point so that you're always swinging from the same reference. It might be weight forward, might be weight toward the back foot, whatever it is. You want to be able to have a stable anchor point. And why is that important? Because the ground conditions change, and you want to be able to adapt so that your anchor point stays the same, so that your stroke stays the same. Number 2 is determine what are your trail hand and elbow tendencies. Now, the basics are, you're going to be under, or you're going to be on top, or you're going to be somewhere in between. Some people like to rotate and hit it with their hand on top. Some people like to tuck underneath and hit it with their hand underneath. You need to know that, because that's the right or left miss under the gun, is that you start from maybe a neutral position and then your hand tucks underneath as you go through the ball, because that's your natural tendency, and you miss it to the right. And you can't figure out why your right hand won't behave the way it's supposed to. Well, it's just because it's naturally, whatever the reason it wants to do that, we don't want to fight it. Then, considering when you find out where your balance point is, your trail hand orientation is, then we want you to build your ball position and set up where your perception of the target is the most accurate. So we've known for a long time, we've been doing some sort of vision test since 2000 or 1994. So we've known for a long time that where you stand influences what you see. Your position of your eyes will influence what you see. So if your head's back, some players play with their head behind the ball, probably because that's where they see it best. You've got players that'll tilt their head sometimes one way or the other. You want to be careful about changing that, because as soon as you change the head tilt, you change the appearance of where that putt's going to go, and they start to steer away from it or steer to it. So we want to find that spot, and we want to find that ball position. Then finally, what we want is we want your feet to adjust to the ball position. We don't want you to force your feet. we're going to allow them to be open or a little bit closed, depending on what your body, the message your body sends to your feet when you set up. And then once we know all that, then we can create a movement pattern that works with your posture. And what I mean by that is that we've got people that swing their arms. We've got people that rotate their chests. We've got people that independent right arm or left arm. And they're better. Like Tiger Woods hits it with his right hand, right? And a guy like Jeff Magnum, if you know putting instructors, Jeff swings his left arm. So those are what we call source. They all work. It's good to discover it. Lauren Roberts was a left arm source putting stroke. So we want to create that movement pattern, understanding where that source comes from that fits that, and then finally fit the putter to the result. We probably won't have time to go into that today. So finding a balanced position. If you all can see that, the one thing that we found very quickly was that if you're off balance, if you're not balanced over your feet, knees maybe a little bent, but able to stabilize yourself on the ground, that your hands will react. That if you have an uneven pattern through the ball with your hands, a lot of the time it's because you're not balanced over your feet. That you're probably more likely, but can go both ways. You're too much in your heels leaning back, or you're too far into the balls of your feet or the toes leaning forward. So if you see this purple line here, what we're trying to do, what we found is that the best place to start is if we can get the base of your neck over the tips of your toes. When we see that on a swing cat or a pressure plate, that puts that anchor point basically in the middle of your stance. Just right up against the ball of your foot, but in the arch of the foot. And that'll vary a little bit depending on a player's build. Some will be leaning back a little bit. They'll be toward the back part of the arch. Some will be a little forward, but on the forward part of the arch. But the reason that we chose the base of the neck and your foot pattern is because it's easy to find that on a video. You can send me a picture and I can tell you whether you're balanced or not, because we found these two like points and we can use that. That doesn't mean that there's a whole bunch of other lines or other ways that you can reference it and have it make sense. So here's an example of a player that I work with, and this is the evolution of his posture. So you can see how he started out. You can see a lot of body lean and a large portion of his body weight, his head and part of his shoulders out over his toes. And so the common miss for him was to come out of his stroke a little bit and hold on to it and miss it right. Hit it on the bottom of the putter a lot. He had a hard time staying in that posture as he's going through, because his arms, you can see the fold in his arms. His arms were jammed up into his body, and he really didn't have room to swing through it. So he would either catch it really low, the putter being really low relative to the ball, which wasn't as bad as when he came out of it, hit it on the bottom of the putt. So after a little bit of work, he didn't feel very stable still. So we went to an arm lock, but you can see we got the balance where we wanted it. Okay, you can see now the line crosses the base of the neck, it's across the toes. And then in the final picture on the right, this is the latest picture he sent me, video that he sent me. He's becoming more accustomed to it. He's not using the arm lock putter anymore. You can see a more natural hang of his arms, a taller posture. He's standing a little bit taller. So I think I'm pretty confident that that's going to be the basis of what the work that happens going forward. We're going to work off that length of putter, that lie angle of putter, and that distance from the ball to smooth out his stroke. Now, it meant him changing a little bit of his idea. If you notice, well, and I'll get to it, but notice he also went from a claw to a conventional grip. By getting the posture better, he felt better stability in his right hand, so he felt like he could swing with a conventional grip, which was his goal all along. He wasn't ever comfortable with the claw. This is just one example of, I don't know how many, that we've been able to utilize this tour level, trying to be tour level, college players, high school players trying to get to college, basically all the same. This has been the consistent part of what I do. And it's been working. Just to share that, it works pretty well. All right, here we go. So here's some examples. So I picked on one guy that's getting his brains beat in on social media every day because his putting struggle. But if you look at Scotty on the left, the difference between that picture and Augusta National win was that he's leaning into his toes quite a bit more than he used to. He's got a forward lean, and he's also strengthened his left hand, which is what we'll talk about that going forward. Instead of a neutral left hand, he's got his left hand on top. My guess is when he started to lean into his toes, he felt like he couldn't release the putter. He was jammed into the ball and he couldn't release the putter. So what he did was he strengthened his left hand to see if he could get that toe to release with his hands. Well, he's still jammed up and he's still fighting with that. So that's my 2 cents worth, Scott. If anybody knows Scotty, send that to him. Please tell him to fix that. I think he'll be in good shape. I'm kidding. All right, there's Tiger Woods. You can see Tiger, base of the neck over the toes. Steve Stricker, base of the neck over the toes. I don't know how many down the line photographs I have of tour players where the guys that weren't struggling were in that position. It was a common thing to find, and we discovered it when we were looking for a place to help fit putters. So you got to have a place to start. Well, if we could get base of the neck over the toes, then what length and what lie did we need to get to the ball position that they used? And we still use that. Moving along pretty good here. Well, 20 minutes. We're doing pretty good. All right. So how do you find it? How do you find a balanced setup? Well, step number one is to ask the player to stand with his feet together and strike a pose that he feels like he'd use with his putting stroke. And the beauty of having their feet together is they will never lean over their toes with their feet together, because they will feel off balanced and they'll just settle in. Then starting with that as a reference point, now give them their putter and ask them to go ahead and set the putter down on the ground. And you'll notice that they still stack over their feet. Okay, once you find that, then ask them to close their eyes and take their stance. Now, by closing your eyes, your body will naturally keep you where you're stable. It won't allow you to make a weird move, because its entire goal when your eyes are closed is to keep you from falling down. So you'll come in and you'll show them a balanced posture. Then what needs to happen is that if the putter length or lie doesn't allow that posture, you got the wrong putter. You got the wrong length putter, the wrong lie angle putter. So the next step, and I'm going to skip, I kind of added one in. So here's some examples. Sorry. So again, this is what we'll be looking for. This is what we're looking for from a heel to toe balance point. We want to maintain this line from the base of the neck to the toes. Okay. Now, once we've established that balance, then using that balance, we're going to come back and we're going to add the ball, and we're going to find the ball position relative to the feet together where they see it best. Okay, or where they feel like that's where they'll set up, probably is more appropriate. And it's going to be somewhere in one of those 9 zones for the most part. We very rarely, 1 out of 1,000, do we see somebody off that grid. And number two represents the left eye. The ball's directly under your left eye, and then the rest of them are referenced off of that. So it would be off the side of your head, 1, 4s, and 7s. We consider these zones, so we know that you're going to fall. You might be a little bit more outside of it, or you might be in between them a little bit, but we consider them zones, and it gives us a reference point to talk about instead of how does it, where is it in your stance? Because your feet are a variable, and if I use my feet like 2 inches inside my left foot, I can move that left foot and never be in the same spot twice. So I want to find relative to the eyes and the head, I want to find that ball position so that you can put your feet wherever you're balanced and you'll be in the right spot relative to your shoulders and your head and your arms and parts that are going to move to hit the putter. Now you've got the player. Now ask them to close their eyes and watch their head as they set their feet, as they set their stance. And what direction does the head move as the player takes their stance. So like, for example, this is Aaron Badley, and when Aaron does that drill, his head goes to his left foot. So he naturally anchors on his front foot. So this has gone through his entire swing as he's moved to a more of a front post player, stack and tilt. Mike Adams calls it front post. Any number of players, Morad, it's the pressure left. It's whatever, however you're doing it. This is a front leading player, and that's basically his setup. Now that's as exaggerated, and I use this photograph because it is. He doesn't play quite that, but the pressure's still on the front foot. And you can see how his head moved with his foot. So the relative ball positions, they move forward. So you can have a player like Aaron who's playing the ball basically in line with his left eye, but the ball's way forward in his stance because of the way that his balance point is. And well, why do we worry about that? Well, because that's the bottom of the arc. In between your ears is basically the bottom of your arc. So if you play it forward of the bottom of your arc or behind the bottom of your arc, you're going to have to make an adjustment to the stroke path to fit that. Okay, they're not all going to be straight. So as you get farther back, the strokes have a tendency to go left. As you get forward, strokes have a tendency to go to the right. It's basically D-plane stuff. Driver, 9-iron. What happens to my path so I can get a zero path? Same thing with ball position and putting. Looking for a zero path, you've got to make some adjustments in the stroke to fit that. Okay. All right, here we go. There's kind of a famous player. You can see he centers up pretty good. And his stroke kind of matches what he does now. He plays, the bottom of his arc is basically right where the putter's sitting right now from the Putt Lab reports that we've seen. And so he doesn't have to make a lot of adjustments in his stroke. He just comes in, he hits it about 1 degree up, 2 degrees up at the most, and gets a solid strike from there. I failed to mention, our goal is always to hit the ball in the middle of the putter. If I'm having a conversation about forgiveness, then I know that I'm probably talking to a country club player. Because if you've got a stroke that needs forgiveness on the tour, yeah, it's tough. That's a tough way to go. And I always it always disappoints me when I see what we call revert to average or regress to the mean, where I'd be making so much money if I could just putt average. Well, I don't know why your goal would be average if you're that great a ball striker. Why would that be good enough? It's not impossible to find a stroke that works. It's just that if you settle for something, that you'll get what you settle for. Okay, get off my pedestal here. And then here's an example of a balance anchor point over his right foot. This player, Brad, will tell you he feels pressure in his left leg, but he's pushing against his left leg from his back foot. So his anchor point is right, but he feels pressure left. Okay, and so that moves his center of gravity back. That moves the bottom of his arc back. And you can see he actually plays the ball maybe slightly forward of the other two guys. But if you look at his stance, it's in the middle of his stance or even back a little bit. So I use those 3 examples just to show you that feet probably aren't your best way of measuring where the ball position is, because you can play too many games. And we know just from experience and study that probably the number one reason that we will miss putts on the tour is inconsistent ball position. You can imagine guy hit 500 putts from the same spot, and then all of a sudden he gets on the golf course and the ground conditions move that ball position a little bit because he's judging it with his feet, and all of a sudden the ball's too far forward or too far back and he misses the putt and he doesn't know why, or she doesn't know why. And they start to make adjustments because of the miss. And that's why now the stroke goes south. And what probably was just the ball position issue to start with. So I'm always starting with ball position when I'm talking to a player and saying, where are we going to play this thing and how are we going to build a setup that makes sure that ball's in that same spot relative to my arm and my chest and my shoulders and my hands, which is the important part. And then stabilize the lower body. I'm going to hit it flush most of the time. All right. How to find a grip. The easiest way to figure out where your grip should be is take a putter and just grip it with your right hand. Or you can use a sand wedge if you want, because I like the round grip. It's more flexible. And go ahead and grip it with your right hand and just swing it back and forth and watch what it does. Does it open up or close at the end of the backswing, or does it stay stable? Do you feel the face wobbling, going open and closing as you take it back, or does it go close to open? Can you feel that? And then what you'll do is you try and adjust that right hand to find where it feels the most stable. And I've been doing this for a number of years now, probably 5 years, using this particular one. And I've never had a situation where a player couldn't find some stability. They always say, Bruce, I like this best. Okay, let's use that. And so, like I said, you're going to feel the difference, but as an instructor or as you're watching, you can see it. You can see him take it back and have the toe flare open at the end of the backswing, or the toe rotate shut at the end of the backswing. And you know that, well, that's got to be the wrong grip. So you find that one that's stable. You don't put a lot of, it's not a perfect thing. You're just trying to build to something. Find that stable right hand. And then that's the grip that we're going to use going to the next step. All right. So once I found the stable right hand, then I'm going to go ahead and put my left hand where it fits with the right. Okay. Now I use the tailor-made golf ball because my old eyes see that stripe the best. It's that big wide yellow stripe. I've been using it for 3 years. I'm sure I've given away 100 dozen golf balls because it's just, here, take this. And what it does is it as good as the technology? No, but I don't have anything attached to a putter, and the player gets to immediately see if it works or not. So I like that. So what we do is we go ahead and we just put the line down and try and get it as vertical as possible. Do not point it at a target. Just let them hit it and see if the ball rolls end over end. And if it doesn't, and we know that the right hand is fairly stable, now we'll start to adjust the left hand. So for example, if the left hand rotates to a weaker position, that's going to close the face, that's going to go, or does it rotate back on top? Does it at impact, I start in one spot, but does it rotate during the stroke so that impact it doesn't match? One of the ways that the easy way to see this is take a slow motion video face on, look at the grip at address, ask them to hit the putt, look at the grip at impact, and you can see how they've changed the orientation of their hands to come into impact. We call it the impact tendency. And I think the easiest way to get somebody to hit it solid and square is just put their hands where they're going to come to at impact. If you're going to come in a little bit more on top with your right hand and your left hand's going to go underneath a little bit, then that's how we're going to grip the golf club. And then now all you have to do is come back to, you start and finish and come back to the same spot, and the ball will start to roll end over end. Usually right now I'm down, it's 4 or 5 putts is about all I need to get them to hit it square. I will tell you that I've never had anything in my teaching that inspires confidence like a player seeing that line go end over end and tracking dead straight. I get high-fived every day because now they know, hey, I flushed that one, didn't I, Bruce? Yeah, you sure did. That was great. And especially in beginning players that, I'm just getting started. And for them to think that they can hit it perfectly is huge, just huge. The other thing is now they'll believe the other stuff that I tell them a lot easier. So when I'm explaining what else is going on, they're buying in because, hey, this guy just got me hitting it flush. So I really highly recommend go ahead and you don't have to use the line to play. You don't have to use it anywhere. But I think it's a good indicator of just how the quality of the strike. And I tell everybody, I'm sure there's a bunch of my friends that are sick of hearing me say it, but it is really strong. It's really strong, and the feedback is really strong. Now there's some things that can happen that in the stroke that you might not get the perfect roll. Number one is a toe or a heel strike on any putter, not just the blade. If you hit it on the toe with the mallet, it will not roll end over end. It might go faster. It might come off there faster, but there's going to be a wobble in that line. The strike on the ball, the force vectors don't match the line on the ball's going to wobble. You probably have a lie angle issue, that especially in the modern mallets, the shallow faced modern mallets, toe up, they do not perform well. They are built to swing parallel to the ground. And if you have a player that's toe up with a mallet and struggling with their putting, boy, bend that thing first. Get it so it's flush, because that'll improve the strike, and that'll help them feel better about the hit. They're playing the miss for the most part if they have the toe up on the mallet. It's very important. Now, blades, not so much. When the center of gravity is closer to the face, you can get away with a little toe up or a little toe down. Just using the Newport and the tri-soles, where it sits a little in the heel, or if it sits a little in the toe, you get away with it. Tiger rolls the ball perfectly with the toe up a little bit with his Newport. Not that that's an advantage. It's not necessarily an advantage. It's just easier to get a better strike with that blade in that situation. Obviously, you've got that face angle issue that we talked about. The other that people don't realize is that when you launch a ball too low, if you've got a lot of, let's say you got 2 degree putter and you've got 3 degrees of shaft lean, and you're launching the ball, even though you hit down on it, because the face is pointed down, you're going to launch that ball into the turf. That will always kick that line one direction or another. It'll spin that line up for you, and now that line won't roll end over end. So you'll hit it perfectly flush. The ball will go in the hole straight, but the line wobbles. It's almost always a launch issue. I'm not launching it correctly. And we can discuss launch all day. Everybody always asks me what the optimal launch is. Well, I've got one group that says 1. I've got one group that I believe what they do says 2. I've got another group that says 3. Tiger launched it at 4. So, it could be anything really. All I know is that negative or 0, you're running into danger. That the interaction with the turf that early will kick that ball offline more often than we would like. And then the ball position. That ball position and the stroke path doesn't match the ball position, and that goes back to the profiles. Like, for example, if you play the ball forward of the bottom of your arc and you swing outside in, you're never going to see the ball roll end over. Okay. Or if you play the ball middle of your stance and you swing inside out, you get the same result. It will not roll end over. So what you're trying to do is you're always trying to match the arc to the target line by tilting the plane. Inside down the line for the driver, straight back to left with a 9-iron. It's the same kind of thing. Where's the ball relative to my stance? Where's the ball relative to the path? And where's the ball relative to the target line? Okay. D-plane. It's just D-plane. So, and that discussion, we can do that anytime, but that's been a big help for me, is to understanding that the D-plane applied in putting as well. In fact, I was sharing this information years ago with a guy that's a pretty famous instructor, and he goes, "Well, Bruce, it's just D-plane, isn't it?" I said, "Yep." And I said, "But nobody's using it, so I feel like I have to describe it. And if you understand D-plane, I don't have to describe it to you." All right, so here's what we see with the grips. I got off the track a little bit. This is what we would consider a cover or on top or weak, right? Where the player's impact tendency is for the wrist, the right hand and the right wrist to be more on top, and the forearm to be rotated inwardly a little bit. Forearm rotation is huge. So what you're really matching is that grip. What we're really trying to control is the forearm rotation. We don't want him to rotate his forearm any further than where he sets up, because that's going to be a left miss. So we use the grip to lock the forearm. Probably the simplest way to put it. Here would be an example of a neutral grip. Tiger's pretty vanilla when it comes to all this. Center post, neutral grip, the whole thing. Going back, I forgot to mention something. The thing to remember with this grip is that a player's tendency will always be to swing left of his body alignment. He's going to want to come back and left as opposed to inside out, because that elbow, if you notice where his elbow's pointed, it's not pointed at his hip. It's pointed, I don't know if you can see my phone. That elbow's pointed out here somewhere. So it's not going to go inside. It's going to go straight or back. Okay. And these players, typically what happens is that they'll end up playing a little bit closed to compensate for the hand going left. So they'll close their stance, they'll turn the hand on top, and they'll play the two against each other. That's the first thing that we did with Aaron. Is this is Aaron Badley, and with Aaron we said, Aaron, let's go to a closed stance just so you can feel that you can release the putter. So that's the first thing that we did, is we did some putts closed. That was an old feel to him. This feels like it's supposed to, Bruce. Okay, now you can put your feet where you want because you got your feel what you need. All right. Just an example of using it. Like I said, Tiger, we're always watching what he's doing. But this is when it's square, when your hand is square, then the path is going to be neutral to the body. You're going to swing wherever your shoulders are pointed. So the typical problem for the neutral players, they get open shouldered. Their feet are square, but they tilt a little bit right outside of left. The path goes outside in. Well, everything being neutral, the ball just goes left. But they feel like they're square, but they often need somebody to show them that they've got their right arm a little too high. They've got that left tilt. See it all the time. Every Monday on the tour, you see the guys working on trying to get their shoulders back to square. And then this would be what we call the under tendency. This would be the right hand underneath, the elbow more into the side, kind of locking into the side. There are much more dramatic examples than this, but I like using Brad because that setup, we know it works, and we know it works from that stronger grip. So it's good. And if you notice, and when you see players that have a pretty strong right hand grip, you'll also see very often you'll see an open stance that they will adjust. So instead of swinging inside out, like Brad doesn't swing inside out at all, even with that tendency for the putter to want to go right of his body alignment. So all he does is he just turns his body alignment, the hips and the feet a little bit, to clear a path for the putter to go more straight. And so he can release the putter without interference, without his hips blocking his stroke, basically. You hear him talking about moving his knees, that's part of it as well. I need to get my lower body out of the way so I can finish the stroke where I want to. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of other grips. These are just three examples. Left hand low, we typically attribute that to an under player or under tendency. So if the player has a tendency to come in with his palm up into the stroke, then the easiest way to help that player is just get him to be left hand low, put the right hand on in a really under position, lock it in with the left, and then just swing the left arm, and you'll have a little bit of an inside out stroke. Again, you see a lot of left hand low players that play a little bit open to counter that hooking stroke. They don't want to have that big of a hook stroke. So these would be like, when we go back to the profiles, this would be 4s and 7s, 1s. Then you've got the Marco Mira grip, whatever you want to call that. That is for the guy that just so far on top that he can't ever keep from hitting it left. And what we found is those players that get on top, that are the cover players or have a cover tendency, they are most likely to have a grip like this. Lucas Glover, huge on top. He gets his hand on top. So he had to find a way to extend that arm and position that hand so that forearm wouldn't rotate anymore. And so he found it by using the longer putter. Same with Will Zalatoris. He's doing the same thing. He's extending that right arm and he's locking out that forearm rotation. Now he doesn't have that hood and block or whatever was going on. He can just swing the putter more evenly. And I think I'll make a prediction with Will that I think that now he's got his forearm in a position where he can trust it. He's just going to keep getting better putting. He's just getting started. I mean, if you can imagine, you start your golf career at 5 or 6 or 7 and you're learning a stroke. Well, Will's putting stroke is 5 years, he's a 5-year-old. And so you give him a chance to learn how to do it. I've got some, and if it changes, I'll probably try and find somebody to talk him out of it. You don't know me. I'm sticking my neck out. This is why I think you found it. And then this is the Tommy Fleetwood grip. The grip on the far side there is one of my players. We couldn't find a way. We couldn't find a way for her to not use her right hand and not twist her forearm. So this is a lot like what Tommy Fleetwood was, where he locks the wrist underneath the hand And so that stabilizes the arm. And she went just recently, she switched it up in the middle of a tournament and went from, the usual story. I think she was minus 6.7 strokes gained to 1.5 gain just in changing the grip. And she said, Bruce, I knew I was going to do it. She said, I knew I was going to do it after the first hole because I didn't have the shakes. Well, I guess that's the grip we're using then. And, I don't care, whatever I would prefer is out the window. We're going to use that grip. So we're rebuilding her mechanics based on that grip. And we're looking for a grip that fits that grip. We're looking for everything, that when she puts her right hand on there, that everything fits and she doesn't have to think about it and she can just swing. So, all right. So here's an example of a switch. This is going back to my player that I talked about earlier. Trying to get his card back now, but you can see he was on top. He couldn't trust his right hand because when we think it was because of a balance issue. Got him balanced over his feet, got him comfortable, went back and revisited the test. Well, he's way better with his hand underneath. So you can see that really strong right arm, that really tucked right elbow. And then the left side just swings around that anchored right side. You can see changed putters. He's able to use a conventional length putter rather than the arm lock now. He still likes that. He likes the stability of the grip, but notice it's more of a blade style now than a mallet. He's going for feedback. He's looking for feel. He's not worried about forgiveness as much as he was. So whether the blade is an advantage over the mallet or not, it fits his preference of what he's looking for in his stroke, and we don't have to put a negative in there and say, oh, you try and do this, but you have to use a mallet because we need the forgiveness. I don't like to do that to a player. I want him to say, hey, this is one, we're going to find the center of this thing. If you miss it, you're going to know it, and we're going to keep going until you hit it flush every time. The reason I'm so adamant about this is when I was younger and I was traveling, I went to Hank Haney's ranch and I was changing the software on PuttLab, and there was a player in there, TW, and I took a guess who it was and looked at probably 1,000 different examples of his stroke in about a 20-minute time. I was flying through them. But one of the things that impressed me the most is that in that 1,000 repetitions, Tiger had one spot on the putter where he hit it, about the size, a little bit bigger than a nail head. And he literally hit it in the same spot for 1,000 reps. So I said, and then Dave Pell saying years ago that the difference between good putters and bad putters is the good putters hit it on the same spot. And, and going back and hearing, what guys before me, what they were seeing, that I've just become an advocate for finding a way to hit it in the middle of the putter as opposed to a forgiveness. There's a pretty famous guy that influencer just recently made the comment that you didn't really feel it was necessary to hit it in the middle of the face anymore because of the design of the putters. And that was about 3 nights of no sleep for me, to not get on the phone and start calling people. But, it's just, I think it's really important. And I know that most of the people that come to you for a lesson are looking to get better. And I think it helps. Just my recommendation is give them some hope that they can be really good, not just average. They might just end up average, but you're gonna go through these same steps or similar steps anyway. So you might as well say, hey, you keep getting better. Okay. So now finding where we see it best. And I apologize for this one. I had a presentation and I had to narrow it down for this one, and I was just finishing it up over the weekend. So forgive any errors. One of the things that I think is really important, the easiest way, let me back up. The easiest way to find where you see it best is a straight line reference, not all the way to the target. A lot of people use a string all the way to the hole, and well, your eyes will make the connection of the string from ball to hole, and it'll say, okay, we're good to go there. But if you use a partial, like Mike Adams, Mike uses a yard, just a alignment stick, and he has the player roll it back and forth until he finds the position where it looks like it's going straight. I use a ruler, but now I use that tailor-made golf ball, and I'll ask him to point the golf ball at a target about 10 feet away. Then I'll ask him, without looking at the target, I'll ask him to set up to that ball, looking at the line based on where the line is referenced, set up so that they feel that they're comfortable with where they're set up to the line. and it'll be one of those 9 positions. It'll fall. And basically, if you notice, the big toe on your left foot and the big toe on your right foot kind of line up with your eyes. So it'll be just inside the right eye or under the left eye, or it'll be left of the big toe on your left foot. But feet right together. Your feet are about the width of your head, not quite, but pretty close. And you can use your big toe then to reference where that ball is. Okay. Now, why I want you to do this is because you won't use your feet as a reference for aim. One of the things that we found pretty early on is when we would tilt your feet, when we tilted Aaron's feet to accompany that forward ball position to get him to go inside down the line like it was his old stroke, as opposed to the outside in move that he was making, it was because the ball had gotten farther back in his stance. And because when we closed his feet, he thought he was aiming right. So when he used a square stance, that threw his path off. So we had to find a way to get it. So we found the ball position in the feet. Well, when his feet are together, he doesn't even think about it. He just sets it up. There I go. I'm good. So I'm not being confused by the direction of my feet. Well, what we found was that if we put the feet last, you've already lined it up. Your brain is happy with where you're set up. It doesn't care where you put your feet. You can be closed, open. It won't feel like you're going left or right. But if you start open or closed and try and build it with your feet apart, then the feet will influence what direction you're going. And you'll set the putter square to your feet, and that'll be a left aim or a right aim. So I think it's really important, especially for a player that's struggling, to understand that don't let the feet influence the aim. Okay. And just as important, why we want your feet together when you're preparing to hit the putt, is that we don't want your body to react to where your feet are placed. Okay. We want the feet to react to where your shoulders and your arms are positioned. One of the things that you'll hardly ever see is when their feet are together, you won't see open shoulders. They'll be pretty square. They might be a little bit open, but that'll be a function of the grip that they're using more than it is just leaning left. And so they'll set up fairly square. And then if you ask them to close their eyes when they're set their feet will go where they naturally are balanced. The shoulders are telling the feet where to go. So the feet will follow the shoulders and everything will be imbalanced. And you don't get this torque of open shoulders, closed stance that maybe you can't handle. And I could go on for, this could be an hour, but I think it's just important, and you can be casual about the feet. You don't have to put them dead set together. You get more experience with a player and you can say, all right, let's just make sure that we're not using our feet as a reference until the last thing. And all the feet, the only goal of your feet is to keep you from falling down. And for a lot of teachers, they'll want to push back on me on that. Well, Bruce, I have to have a parallel stance. No, you don't. You're not trying to spin the ball. You're not worried about ball flight here. You're not using your feet for path. You're using your feet for balance. And the reason is because you're not rotating your hips and you're not and moving your knees. There's no lateral movement in your lower body, or there's very little. So all we're looking is for stability. And we're going to use the shoulders as the determiner of what path the putter takes. Anyway, I always get pushback on that one. So I'm more than willing to have the discussion on that. All right. Then the final one is, and how am I doing on time?
We're about 5. We are going to just let everybody know we are going to be over 1 hour. It's about an 90-minute presentation. So yeah, just kind of make sure everybody's aware of that. But we're about 5 minutes till 2.
I'll just go through this really quickly. What we're looking for when we talk about how a player moves, right? We've seen them all. We've seen left arm dominant, no body. We've seen right arm dominant, a little bit of shoulder. We've seen shoulders with passive arms. We've seen connected chest, rotate the chest. We've seen, boy, you name it, we've seen it. And they all work for somebody. But what we found was that your body type kind of dictates what's easier for you to do and what's harder for you. You know, we've all made the discovery, boy, that feels good in my stroke. Well, we've been able to narrow that down a little bit, say, okay, if my arms are shorter than my wingspan, shorter than my height, then I'm probably going to bend a little bit more from the top, and the thoracic region of my spine getting into the chest is going to point more down. Well, what we're looking for is we would like that from a putter fit. We would like that spine angle to be parallel to the shaft. That way the putter doesn't twist. It's an engineering thing, right? If my shoulders are going one way and the putter's going another, when I rotate the shoulders back, I get this kind of movement. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get everything working at right angles and parallel. Then I don't have to worry about face opening or closing as much. And that's if you use a chest. Now I've got Brad here because he just sets it up perfect for this. If you ask him, I don't think he'd tell you he's all chest. There's a lot of arm swing, but he's able to do that easier because he's got the parts that fit. The robot fits better, and he can swing it that way. But if you're a connected core player, or if you're a lie angle balanced player, and you want the putter to swing in a neutral position, then you want that spine to be at 90 degrees to the shaft angle. Okay. Oh, sorry. The next one, and these are the options that they've got. You got a lot of options if you can get your chest parallel to the shaft. The next one is when the shoulders, the cervical area of your spine, leading into the top of the thoracic, if it's pointed, if I make a line and point, it'll point parallel to the line from the old Holgan's pane of glass, right? Where the ball goes through the base of the neck. And we use that as a distance indicator. You can be 8 degrees off the ball, you can be 10 degrees off the ball, 12 degrees off the ball. But I think that's a more reliable way for me to understand how far you are from the ball. Well, it turns out that line that we used also comes into play for guys like Steve Stricker, whose shoulders, his collarbone and his shoulders, it rotates on a 90-degree plane, or on a plane that's exactly parallel to the distance he is from the ball. So he never has to worry about the face opening and closing because of his mechanics. If it did it, he did it because of his hands, and his hands reacted, or his forearms reacted. Well, tricks, it doesn't happen very often. So this is Tiger Woods. This is a lot of players on tour. We see this. And so this is more independent. The arms are swinging kind of with the shoulders. Not a lot of chest rotation in this stroke, maybe a little, but not a lot. It's more shoulders and arms. And it can have a dominant side. Left arm dominant, right hand dominant. It'll swing on plane. If you notice, Strick's right forearm is pretty much parallel to that line to the ball. And that's, so the forearm is 90 degrees to the shoulders. Makes it a lot easier to have a steady rotation, or no conflicted rotation. Here's again, these are the options. I think everybody's going to have this, aren't they? The PowerPoint, so they can always reference back if I miss something. And you can always call me. And then the final one is the player stands tall, a lot of arm swing, no chest, no shoulders, just left arm back, right arm through. When Nick Faldo, you'd hear Nick every week would talk about the left arm back and the right arm through as his preferred way to swing it. If you notice there, the forearm also is lined up, in this case, lines up with the distance line, the blue line. But you can see the other angles don't work. At the top, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with the shaft. He's got issues. So the more quiet he can, this is Bubba right-handed, obviously. The more quiet this player could be with his chest and his shoulders, and just feel a feeling of the arms, a pendulum swing with the arms, the easier it is to control the putter. We think that's where he would have the best feel, and that's the start of the conversation. So in all these cases, for us, if you get to this level with the player, it's not the law, it's just the start of the conversation. And you can explain to them why maybe one technique wouldn't work compared to another because of just the pure mechanics of your setup. The engineering's off, the robot. Our joke is, for most of my players, is that we got a robot that looks just like you and moves just like you, but it fell off the back of the truck when we brought it to the golf course and we forgot to put it back together. And so you get this twisted motion, this twisted movement that they can't figure out why the putter goes where it's going. And there's the options there. Okay, that's probably as fast as I can do it without choking myself. So, boy, any questions? there's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out anytime if you got a question. Most of my students, in fact, right now, all of my students that are professionals are online. So if you're trying to get a hold of me, Mondays isn't really the best day because I start about 2 in the morning and we go till about 3 in the afternoon of just people getting ready to play in a tournament. But other than that, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of and always glad to talk putting.
Bruce, we got a question that pops up here, and
Okay.
one of our better players in the section here. It says, I noticed that a lot of tour players swing the putter shorter on the follow through than the backswing. So it feels to me like it's less nervy of a stroke. What are your thoughts on an ideal length of stroke?
All right. So if that player's there, my first question is, can you tell me where you anchor between your feet? Do you feel weight forward, weight centered, weight back? It works better. I'll just go to here. It works better and it's much easier to do without recoil if you have your weight, if you're a front post putter. If you anchor toward the front foot, then the path of least resistance is going back and not coming through because you're blocking the follow through. And so why is it so popular? Well, most guys putt off their front foot. Okay. So they were trying to make an equal stroke with their weight forward while their body's blocking that follow through. And that's why it might look like you have to force it. The one thing I never want to do is force it. I never want you to have to do something. I think there's always a reason why something works. And so, yeah, the longer back and shorter through, if your weight's forward, yeah, beautiful. But if your weight's centered like Tiger Woods and you saw your follow through off because that's the popular trend, then you're going to have speed control issues. And if you look at Tiger in the last part of his career, he's shortened up his follow through, probably just because he feels more stable, just like you mentioned. But if you watch him, he can't control the distance like he used to. He's forcing that follow through. He's forcing that stroke, and that's a conscious effort that I'm trying to make in my stroke. And we all know that conscious effort during a putting stroke is hard to replicate. So I highly recommend, if you have a preference in stroke length, to go ahead and move the anchor point to where you prefer to do it. You're not naturally predisposed to be on your front foot putting. I think guys can putt. A player can putt from anywhere, but I think that you have to be conscious that you put it in the same spot every time. So what you might find, what you probably will find, is that you will anchor right under your left ear, and that would be sufficient enough for you to have a little bit shorter going through.
But, all right, so I got another question, but I'm going to ask Linda Gotti, if you want to step on here. I don't quite understand your question that you have here, the picture before. You have a question about the picture before?
Yes, I missed that one. The one you're saying about the parallel to the shaft. Okay, the one that
guy.
one.
Yeah, if you look at him, is it Linda? Linda, if you look at him down the line, you'll see the tilt. You'll see the tilt of their shoulder blades, right? And what you're looking for is you want whatever lie angle that fits where they see it best, right? Which I think in this picture, fax is 69 degrees. Then you're going to see a tilt where the shoulders tilt so that you can get that right angle. Okay. And so I can walk up to fax and I can point and I say, hey, Pards, we're rotating right from here, right there. That's the center of your rotation of your shoulders going around in that player's instance. And you can literally go and put your hand on their back where that 90-degree angle is, and say, feel it here, rotate around this spot. It's really effective to do that. And you're not fighting it, you're just not fighting the geometry when you do that.
Does that help make your lower forearms kind of get parallel too, then it looks like?
Yeah, but it will, but it depends on the length of your forearms. So you can use your forearms parallel to hips or wherever. I mean, I see them, everybody, right? They want a straight line from the putter to the forearm. Cameron wants the forearms parallel to your thighs, whatever it is, it's all determined by the length of your arms. And it's also determined by the length of your forearm compared to the length of your upper arm. So you don't want to force the elbow bend to find a spot.
Okay. Thank
Okay. I think it's safer. Let me put it that way. It's safer to do that. Now, somebody will prove me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Somebody will come in and say, Bruce, I can do it like this. I can do it great. Beautiful. Are you aware of how you do it? Yes. That's all I'm looking for, right? I'm just trying to make the player more aware. I'm not trying to create any rules. I'm like a young lady from your section who's a friend of mine. Bruce, you're the most wishy-washy teacher I ever met. Because I won't just stand there and tell her that was the best way. And she's doing it as a joke, because I've got right now, just based on mechanics and setup alone, I got 243 different options that I can use within my system. So I'm looking at a player, I go right to the option. And that makes me smarter in the conversation. That's all it does. I can predict what it feels like for the player. I can tell them, does this feel, you feel it now? Oh yeah, that's better. That putter's not closing when I take it back. That kind of stuff. And that's all you
Bruce,
really go ahead.
I'm gonna pull a question for you too. I mean, I've got you're obviously talking, when you're talking forearm length and upper arm length, or we could go on for hours with with Mike Adams' information and stuff that Mike does and so forth. But we got one question out there that is, do you see a posture change from a 6-footer to a lag putt? Is there much difference in what they're doing?
Taller. But they also changed the source. So like, for example, let's use Crenshaw, for example. Ben always stood a little taller on long putts, but he disengaged his shoulders and it became an arm swing. Okay, so let's say if I go from, let's say just for example, I go from Fax to Bubba, just for an example. Well, I don't want to use a shoulder rotation from there because that putter is going to go shut in the backswing and I'm going to mishit that long putt. So I'm going to go more arm swing. I'm going to change my source with my posture, if that makes sense. Yeah, it happens.
So now let's talk about, one thing we haven't talked about is stance width. Do you see, how does stance width influencing not necessarily direction of your stance, but the stance width influence how the stroke changes?
What we think, and this is just, I'll qualify this. So this is just observation. We think what happens is that the stance width becomes a way for you to fit the putter that you got in your hand better. If I'm playing a putter that's too short, I'll feel better with a wider stance. If I'm playing a putter that's too long, I'll feel a lot better if I got a putter or if I'm using a narrow stance. And I'm the first to admit that I'll cheat if I'm in a session, like say I'm doing a group lesson and people are just looking to can I get better quicker with the putter that I got? We don't have time for a deep conversation. I'll literally see that I think the putter's too long. I'll make them stand up, or I'll let's go wider with this one. But that's the way I look at it. If you're asking me, do I think there's an optimal stance width? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say the balance, that your body type is going to dictate the stance width. For example, if your arms are longer than your height, right? Or if you have long arms, you're going to have a heck of a time with a wide stance. What am I going to do with all that arm, right? And so the opposite being true, a narrow with my arms are much shorter than my height, but I like to try and play narrow, and I'm not anywhere near as good narrow stance as I am wide, not even close. So I think it's a balancing out thing. One of the things that you'll find is that if you sole the putter on the ground and close your eyes and take your stance with no conscious thought of how wide it is, you can't see it, they'll kind of go where they're supposed to go. You can say, oh, it's, now, and I don't have a problem. You can be ultra wide if you want. You can be ultra narrow if you want. I have a lot of players putt with their feet together because we can't get the balance thing right. So I think we got 3 wins. I had players 3 different wins with their feet together. You can imagine my phone rings pretty good when somebody wins with their feet together and they find out who told them to do that. So, but it's just a balance thing, right? So where my feet go is where I'm balanced the best, or where I feel balanced the best. If you play with a lot of knee bend, if you like to feel athletic and play with a lot of knee bend, you'll be wider. If you like to stand, without a lot of knee bend, you probably want to get longer putter, taller. I hope that answers the question.
Sure.
I didn't really answer it, did I? I gave you a whole bunch of options, but yeah, the wishy-washy part kicked in, I guess.
Well,
But
I mean, that's always one of our teachers in the section, and I'll name him because he's such a good friend of mine and
yeah.
mentor is Bernie Najar. And I always kind of
Bernie.
kidded him.
Yeah.
I always kidded Bernie that he needed to get sponsorship with Depends because, like you're saying that obviously you're referring to Sarah, and when you were talking about that, and it's like anytime you ask Bernie a question, it's always it's like, well, he won't answer the question directly, and I always kid him because he goes, when I catch him off, it goes, well, it depends on this, and it depends on if they're leaning front post, if they're on the back, if it's. And so it's always that depends question that he always kind of gives reference to. And I always laugh at him about that.
Well, I think everybody's looking for the perfect stroke. And I go back to that analogy when the putt lab people wanted me to tell Tiger his stroke wasn't optimal because it wasn't their version of perfect. And I said, well, I like the one that makes 1,000 in a row from inside 6 feet better than I like the one that looks good on some sort of measuring system. So that's what I'm hoping this is it's a path to discovery. And so I don't know how many times I've online or in person that I've done this. And what I do is I take this actual document, not this actual one, but one very close to it, and I fill in the blanks. So at the end of each section, this is you. And then we just keep going. And so they have, for every lesson, then I give them a document that says, this is what we talked about. Now you can use this against me, come back and say, Bruce, I don't like this, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Well, at least we got a framework for our conversation, as opposed to this is the wrong way or this is the right way. I don't know what the right way is. Not at least for more than one person.
Depends.
And so, finding your stroke. And that's why in this is part of a document that's 500 pages long. And then in that, I said, there's 3 ways you can learn to putt. You can copy somebody else. You can copy a method, a theoretical method, or you can throw a ball on the green and you can hit one ball till you figure it out. Harvey Pinnock, right? Well, turns out that the guys that are really good, the players that are really good, most of them were the one ball method that then when they got the chance to measure it, they found out what they did right and where they might have had a problem, and they enhanced what they did. They didn't change what they did. So this is an attempt to help you find that your way. Instead of spending 15 years on the putting green, maybe we can spend 15 hours on the putting green and come up with the same result.
I'm going to go to this one first. I got a question here from Chris that talks about, do you think that there's any, what do you think about rhythm in the stroke? Is there a correct, using a metronome for rhythm in the back and through? Obviously there's some devices out there and they'll tell you that the rhythm needs to be this, or the rhythm needs to be this. What's your, we talked about length of backstroke a little bit, but, is there a correct rhythm?
All right. Well, here we go. Yes, for the player. So what we used to do, we don't need to anymore because we've got a dozen ways to measure it, but we used to watch the player walk into the lesson, and we knew if they were going to be up-tempo or more rhythmical by how they walked. Use that to start. The 2-to-1, that's the famous, 2-to-1, and there's a paper written by a pretty famous scientist that says it's a 2-to-1 rhythm. It didn't hold up when we started to measure the good strokes. We saw all kinds of rhythms, slower back, faster through, just whatever suited the player. We think that basically it boils down to there's a 2-beat player where it's back and through and there's not much time in the transition, and a 3-beat player where 1 starts it back, 2 is transition, and 3 takes it to the end. That would be the waltz time or 2-to-1. Okay. But I think it's a mistake to take a player who's an up-tempo player that you see, and you think the stroke's naturally too quick, and try and make them fit that rhythm pattern, because that's just going to throw them off and frustrate them. Not that you're not right. You might be right. That might be the best for them, but you might lose that as a student real quick because, no, that's not how I do it. So now if you explain to them, all right, back hit, right? The old Tim Galloway tennis player that taught people how to play golf. I'm way older than everybody else. I'm sure but back hit, 2 beats, back hit. So back is the backswing and hit is the follow through. And there's no rhythm. There's no timing in them. And then there's the back wait, go, right? And so you can do it the way that we do it is I don't trust, and I'm you know, everybody says, well, Bruce, you've got every, you know, diagnostic equipment. That's kind of your thing. Yeah. But I use video a lot. One of the things I'll do in a video is I'll take a slow motion video. I'll count the frames to the end of the backswing. I'll count the number of frames in transition. Then I'll count the number of frames coming to the ball. That gives me the best indication of what the rhythm is. And then I can work off of that. What we don't like to see is a change in the pattern. We don't like you to go from 2 beats to 3 beats, going from short to long or whatever it is. I don't want to see, I really don't like to see a 3-beat stroke on a long putt and then a 2-beat stroke on a short putt, because you'll be too quick. You'll get to the ball too quickly. So if you think of it in those terms, rather than time, rather than 6 milliseconds to 3 milliseconds to, you know, 2 seconds, and that's how typically they'll measure the ratios with the diagnostic equipment, is they'll use time because that's what the machine can see. If you do it in terms of what the players can think, right? Well, it's count 1, 2, 3 in my stroke. Rhythm gets better right away. Stroke control gets better right away. Speed control gets better right away. And so in a lesson, we'll just try them both and see which way is the easiest to roll 120 feet. That gives us a pretty good indication.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of throw this, and I already kind of know the answer a little bit here, but I'm going to kind of say it a different way.
Okay.
But especially when you're working with beginning players, is there a good method to using length of stroke on the backstroke? So in other words, you know, I'll be honest, I use a lot with my beginners of saying that, you know, for every 10 feet, you need one putter head of backstroke, and you always add one. So a 10 footer is going to be 1. You always add 1. It's 2. Is there, have you seen a good, what do you think of that?
It's the easiest way, Sean. I think it's the easiest way to teach them, to give them an awareness of what generates the speed in the stroke. The problem that I have is growing up in the Palmer organization. If I told everybody that you couldn't be a hitter, he's coming out of his grave and beating me over the head with a club. Ultimate hitter, right? And all he did is, so we'll allow for it, but not with a beginner. Not with a beginner. We think that it's a learned. We don't think you're naturally a hitter and naturally a swinger. We think it's a learned process. And if you've already learned how to do it, then we'll work with it. But if you can just learn to swing the stroke in some sort of rhythm, you're going to be way better off, I think. Way better off. But again, if you got an experienced player, you can run into trouble of telling them to do something different. And you'll go backwards fast. And you hope it's for the ultimate good, but very rarely. A lot of times what we'll do, I'll give you a common problem. A common problem is an underplayer that likes to hit it, because you really literally got to rotate your wrist flat, right? You don't want to do this. So we'll say, okay, go left hand low and hit it with the back of your left hand. Now you don't have to worry about stroke length. And then the drill for the hitters is, I got 2 drills. One is take it to your back foot and roll a ball and see how far it goes. So back foot, length of follow through, whatever your natural length of follow through is. Then walk it off. How far did that putt go? Now, if you take it past your back foot, how far does it go? Take it short of your back foot. How far does it go? Just another version of what you do, right, Sean?
Correct.
And
yeah,
so
absolutely.
And so it's the same thing. Then you throw the yardstick down, then it can go right into depth, right? But for the hitters, tell them to go ahead and hit a putt with their eyes closed. And before you open your eyes, tell me if you're long or short. Do you have a feel for the hit? And if you don't, then we're going to go to the conversation about swinging the putter. If you just can't make that drill work, then we know you're just hitting at it, and there's no real rhyme or reason to the hit. But we got players every once in a while, we'll get a player that goes, yeah, I can, and you just see the hand slow down or speed up, and he's got it dialed in. He goes, no, that's about good. And a lot of times with the eyes closed, it goes in anyway, because they're not staring at it. And, before they get it out, they hear the clang of it going in the hole. So, but there's ways to tell. And like I said, I guess if it weren't for Jack or Mr. Palmer, Mr. Nicholas or Mr. Palmer, or the guys that were good hitters of the ball, that I would probably be a stroke length guy, but it always haunts me when I don't allow for a hit. And if the argument is, well, greens are better, you can't hit it. No, you just don't hit it as hard. You know, it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the speed of the greens. In fact, you're better off on a 6-foot putt, just tapping the back of the ball anyway. How big a swing do you need, right? When you go to Augusta, the guys that are really good on the short putts don't make much of a swing at it, right? So if you're thinking about length of swing on a 5-foot putt, you're going to get jammed up a little bit. So I guess the optimal is hit the short ones and swing at the long ones, I suppose. Okay. You want it best way.
So I'm going to throw a kind of, we had one last question here we're going to throw at. We're going to kind of close it up after this. But so if you've got a student who, I mean, for instance, the question kind of is what do you do about the person that says that you think they think their eyes should be over the ball, and you set them up where they're going to be in that probably 4 or 5 or 6 slot there on the thing. How do you work? I mean, this is more of as a teacher, how do you help when the player has, we'll say, maybe some bad information that you've got to change what they've learned and make the change that's better for them?
Yeah. Take a yardstick or an alignment rod and point it at the hole, and then make sure that their eyes are directly over the implement, the yardstick or the alignment rod. Put their eyes directly over it, and then ask them what direction the rod's pointed. And they'll go, oh, that's a mile left. And then you go, yeah, and that's where your eyes are directly over the ball. So you're putting at a ghost, right? You think it's somewhere, but you're putting to that where you think it is, not where it actually is. And then we'll start to move their head a little bit, and we'll move them around, say, and there'll be a spot where it'll click, and it's normally a little bit inside. What's interesting about eyes over it, when you're kind of half historian like I am, all the guys that promoted eyes over the ball were left eye dominant back in the day. You didn't hear the right eye dominant guys talking about having their eyes over the ball. And it plays out pretty much to be true that if you lead eye dominant, it's a lot easier for you to get your eye right over it. And then if you trail eye dominant, you're gonna be more likely to tilt that right eye so that you see it better from behind it. And it plays out. Adele putters, different patterns on the putters because of how you see it, and it all plays out. I just don't like when I first got started and I started posting what we were finding. The first thing that we posted that maybe eyes directly over the ball wasn't the best way to go, and I got hammered pretty good. If you can, as you can imagine, there were some pretty famous guys that were using that. But then all of a sudden it started to turn around. Sean Foley was a big help for that, because Sean said, yeah, most players are eyes inside. Scotty Cameron, yeah, Bruce, yeah, they're right. Eyes are more inside. David Orb, yeah, eyes are inside. The eyes can be all over. So all of them we all kind of went to that vision test. And I think most of the guys that I know that are putting exclusive instructors use a vision test. I haven't run into a have to be eyes over teacher in a long time. They've loosened up a little bit.
Very good. So we're going to kind of start. Hang on, I got a little question here. Just goes. All right, we had one last question. Kind of put the two or three here at the end. I was going to say, I was going to tell Chris to kind of to talk to you directly. But it does talk a little bit what you're talking about too of eye dominance, because we got Fran on here. And can you discuss the line on the ball versus a line not on the ball, and how how guys start it on the line? I mean, I'm assuming most tour players are going to start the ball pretty close to their line.
Yeah.
So
if you'll notice late in the day in the tournament, when they get close, the guys that are using the line on the ball are rolling it end over end. The guys that are on TV, they're rolling it dead on end over end. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
You're right. No, that's exactly.
All right. First thing to remember is if the line on the ball does not look like it's going in the right direction, your eyes are in the wrong spot, not the ball. Okay. So if your eyes are out of position, if I had a telescope and I asked you to stand 5 feet to the left of the telescope and line up the telescope so you could see the moon, you can't do it, right? My eyes are out of position. So when we're side on to a golf ball, there's a position where our eyes are, where everything kind of clicks. And once you find that, that's the head position, that's the ball position. So if you're struggling with the line on the ball because it doesn't look correct, then that would be a reason to change your setup, change where you stand. Okay. I'm a big proponent of using the line on the ball only because it's a confidence builder. If you're rolling the ball end over end, you're not fiddling around with your stroke during the tournament to try and fix something that's not broken. Okay. So, you know, if you're rolling it end over end, that you had a read issue or you had a speed issue. And you're not changing your, you know, because that's what happens. Thursday was bad. Friday gets worse because I changed it. Don't make it to Saturday. That's the pattern, right? Or for country club players, stroke 1A on the first hole, stroke 2B on the second hole, stroke 3C on the third hole, because I keep looking for the answer, right? Now, if the line bothers you, then just practice with the line on the ball so that you can trust the stroke that you don't use the line. You don't have to use it when you play, but it's the only way. And we can get into the technology, but you can say, well, yeah, I can take my capto out on the green and I can measure and I can see if I'm square or not, Bruce. I can do that. But I promise you, your stroke is not exactly the same in competition or on the golf course as it is with 60 grams strapped to the shaft. It's just not. And it's the same thing for Putt Lab. It's not. It gives you great information. It's really great. But when it comes right down to it, you've got to have a way to take that technology and is it working on the golf course? And the easiest way to do that is to use a line on the ball. Now, Christian's going to disown me for saying that, Christian Markart. The Capto people already have. I'm sorry. It's just the way things are, guys. Now, I know that the Science and Motion guys are working on a way to put the indicator in the head. And when that happens, all bets are off because all the algorithms that we've been using probably aren't going to look the same when we start measuring from the head instead of the shaft. Accelerations are all going to change. Everything's going to change. So you got to just, it's all part of it, right? It's not like TrackMan where I'm looking for a spin rate and I'm looking for a pattern, right? It's not the same. It's trying to tell you what the putter's doing. And 60 grams makes a huge amount of difference in a stroke. And I don't care where you put it. It makes a difference. And so it goes back to the timing question, Sean. If my timing is X with Putt Lab, with that big triplet on there, what is it when I get on the golf course? When the putter's 60 grams lighter. Now what do I got? And all this is just years of using Putt Lab and then guys not getting to the point where they want to and trying to figure out why we didn't figure it out, right? Why didn't we get it exactly where we wanted? I built putters that weighed 60 grams less than normal, 460 grams, and then put the 60 gram weight on that shaft, and I got closer results. So a lot of what you see here is based on a putter that was built to use, right? It was dead neutral. It was just dead neutral. And now I start to see, oh, okay, now we're good. And that's where we saw a bigger variance. One thing we saw right away was a bigger variance in timing and rhythm when you had the light putter when you had a 520 instead of 580. So yeah, that's another one of those, put the platform up and Bruce is preaching again, but
Bruce, we consider and talk for, we consider and talk for hours. I mean, going on even about had a lot of involvement myself with Mike Adams and a lot of that, his work and stuff that I use every day. And
well, John, just real
never
quick,
really thought about it putting.
How this all came up was Mike saw the 9 profiles at a seminar that he did. It was a client of mine that had him laying on the ground. And he looks at him and he goes, "What is that?" And she explained to him, and it's this guy in Indiana. He came up with these 9 profiles for putting. That's what we do. I mean, just immediately. And he called me that night. So I get this call. I don't know Mike. I get this call on my cell phone. It's Mike Adams. I said, "Hey, Mike." I didn't even answer the call. Finally, somebody said, "Hey, you got to talk to Mike. He needs to talk to you." He says, "You need to look at what we're doing." And so I did. And it took me about 10 minutes to convert because it explained everything that I had seen physically, what I was seeing the putter do. It explained to me why it was happening. And it didn't take very long to realize that was the trend. Now, whether you use it or don't use it, or how do you think about it, it makes sense, right? If my arm is turned underneath like that putter one's going to want to swing inside. I mean, that's the way it works. Well, we had seen all those and we were accepting of those. So it was a nice fit. And I did 2 sessions of the Ultimate Golf Lesson to explain how we adapted my stuff to Mike's stuff. it was a game changer for me. Just in the way I look at it. Oh shoot, ground force. I mean, I shadow Mike, and I'm watching him use the ground force. I'm going, how do I use that in putting? That's how we came up with the anchor point. There's a relationship between your full swing and your putting stroke, and from a tendency standpoint, right? And we've found that it helps if you allow the player to do what feels natural to them in their full swing, especially when there's a confidence factor involved. Like
Bruce, I want
to go ahead and hook the putter. Really?
I want to thank you a lot. I mean, this has been enlightening. I'm actually going to definitely be talking to you more and learning from you and getting some new stuff to help my students. That's for sure. I really appreciate this.
I'm always
thank
grateful
you, everybody.
for the opportunity. Don't hesitate to reach out, guys.
Everybody see his phone number and his email address here is the last slide here. Feel free to reach out to him. Send me any questions you have, and I can pass them on to him. But Bruce, thank you very much for being here with us. And I mean, awesome. Just great stuff. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.